Hey, welcome everybody. My name's Pete and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm so glad that you have joined us for week 5 of this series that we're calling Unstuck, How to Move Towards a New and Better You. And I want to welcome everybody that is in the room here. Thank you for making it out in the cold, and welcome to everybody that's watching online. I'm so glad that you made some time for this, whether you are live right now or you're watching in the future. I think that hopefully you're going to learn something helpful this morning. So we're in this series called Unstuck, and just a reminder, this is week 5, so hopefully you kind of already got a vibe of what this series is about. But this series is about or it's for anybody who has things in your life that you want to start doing, and you find, I can't do them. I've been trying to do them, I can't do them. And there's things that you want to stop doing, and you find, every day I just keep doing these things. I feel like I'm stuck. This series is to help you get unstuck. It's also for anybody that has that feeling that there is something inside of you that you want to bring into the world that you haven't been able to bring into the world yet. Like you have this feeling like God put something inside of you that is supposed to be like birthed into the world through you, and you haven't been able to birth it. Like you've just been gestating for years and years on this thing, and it's time to give birth to this thing. It's for anybody that feels stuck. And so we've been talking about how to get the right mindset around getting unstuck. We've been talking about where to begin, and to begin with knowing that your identity in God, and begin there. We've been talking about beginning with systems and forming habits. And last week, Ken talked about how important community is and bringing other people into this journey to hold us accountable and to encourage us. And this week, I thought to end the series, I thought, what could we do, or what could we talk about that would be applicable to every single one of us? What habit could we talk about that would be applicable to every single one of us as something that we all need to start doing to get unstuck? And so I want to talk about one particular habit this morning. But before we get to that habit, I want to talk about an idea around habits by an author named Charles Duhigg, who wrote a book called The Power of Habit. He talked about this idea called Keystone Habits. Keystone Habits. Keystone Habits are like the foundational habits that can cause these ripple effects that then have they have results attached to them that you never really even intended in the first place. They're kind of like the thing that you begin with, and then they cause chain reactions out through them. He defines Keystone Habits this way: they're small changes or habits that people introduce into their routines that unintentionally carry over into aspects of their lives. So there are certain habits that once you get them in place, they have these consequences, these results, these chain reactions, these ripple effects that you didn't even realize that, wow, I just did this one thing and suddenly I'm having all these great things start to happen. All of us have these keystone habits. Some of us have unique ones. Some of us have ones that we all just have as human beings. One of them, as an example, would be sleep. If you don't sleep enough, you'll find suddenly I'm grumpy all the time. I'm really irritable. I have trouble focusing at work. I'm not motivated to exercise, and I just need more caffeine and sugary treats. But if you get that sleep habit in place, that keystone, suddenly all those dominoes start to fall in making your life a lot easier in other ways. For myself, one of my keystone habits is exercise, particularly lifting weights. There's something about me, whether it is part of like how God made me or part of my life as an athlete before being a pastor, that like lifting weights does something to me that it helps me to eat better, because I'm like, well, I'm not gonna work out and then eat bad. That doesn't make sense. So if I'm working out, I'm gonna eat better. If I'm working out, then I sleep better. If I'm working out, then I focus better at work. I find that I have more self-control just in general, because I'm like controlling my body physically, and then it's easier in like spiritual ways to be in control. But for me, one of my keystone habits is exercise. And when that one starts to fall apart, the rest start to fall apart. If I'm not working out, well, then I guess I'll just eat whatever I want. I guess I'm just in a phase where we're letting it all go. You know those phases, people? Yeah, you have those sometimes. But for me, that's one of my keystone habits. Our author, Charles Duhigg, who wrote about these, gives a great example. It's a famous example used all over the place, but it's an example about a company called Alcoa Aluminum. Alcoa Aluminum. And in 1987, they appointed a new CEO whose name was Paul O'Neill. And a room full of investors and shareholders and people interested in the company got together, and they were ready to hear Paul O'Neill's inaugural speech that was going to be about, it's going to be about what CEOs talk about. I mean, we're going to make money, people. We're gonna get that bottom line. We're gonna throw to the moon, rocket ships. We're all going to be driving Lambos. This is going to be great. That's what people were were anticipating the CEO was going to say. And instead, he got up in front of these people and he said, I would like to talk to you all about worker safety. Apparently, someone in the room was like, could you talk more about first quarter profits? I'd be more interested in that. And he said, oh, you didn't hear me. I'd like to talk about worker safety. And then he went on to say this. If you want to understand how Alcoa is doing, you need to look at workplace safety figures. If we bring our injury rates down, it will be because the individuals at this company have agreed to become part of something important. They've devoted themselves to creating a habit of excellence. Safety will be an indicator that we're making progress in changing our habits across the entire institution. Somehow he knew that of all the things he could focus on, worker safety would be a keystone habit that would have ripple effects throughout the entire organization. That focusing on worker safety would make the individual workers feel more valued. And in turn, they would value their work and work harder for the company. And that if managers valued this, that it would create a habit of excellence throughout the rest of the company. And through his 13 years at the company with this focus, Alcoa Aluminum went on to 5x their shareholder price, turning them into a $27 billion company. Nobody would have imagined this on the day that Paul O'Neill got up and said, I want to talk to you about worker safety. This is the power of Keystone Habits. Keystone Habits. All of you have unique keystone habits to your life, but we also have ones that I think we all need. And this morning I want to talk to you about one that I believe every human being on the planet needs. And that when you have this one keystone habit in place, the rest of your life gets infinitely easier and more enjoyable. And you start to taste of this thing that Jesus called the abundant life. Anybody got a guess? Don't yell it out, but just think you got to guess what it's going to be. Mark chapter 1, Jesus spends a whole night healing people. People heard, who's here? Jesus is here. I heard he can heal people. Let's bring everybody that we know that's broken, wounded, everybody that's sick. Let's bring them all. And Jesus is at this house, and all night long he's healing people. And I imagine he's quite tired from doing this. And it says that he wakes up the next morning, and he leaves. And everybody's looking, where's Jesus? Where is he? People are lining up at the door again, and Jesus is gone. And Mark tells us in chapter 1, this is what happened, that very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus had gotten up, he left the house, and he went off to a solitary place where he took extra naps. He needed more naps. Where he was making some fancy bread that he didn't want to share with anybody else. Where he prayed. I want to talk to you this morning about the keystone habit of morning prayer that I believe we see modeled for us in the life of Jesus. But I think that this is a keystone habit that we all need. And once you get this habit in place, the rest of all the other things you got to deal with in your life start to get a little bit easier. This is the first domino that will help you in this getting unstuck. And so this morning what I want to focus on is why is this morning prayer a keystone habit? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how could you begin to build this habit for yourself. But a couple of things just before we get into that. I want to say that most people that I talk to don't pray as much as they feel like they should. Most people that I talk to, including myself, like we all have this feeling of like, my prayer life, I know how to do it. I do have a prayer life, but it's not like the greatest. It's not very, like it could be a lot better. Most people are in that camp. And so if you're listening this morning and you're like, prayer, come on, we all know we're supposed to pray. I got my prayer life on lock. If that's you, then please pray for us this morning while we go through some of the introductory ideas around prayer. And also, if you have, prayer, we could do a whole year-long series on prayer. So there's so much to say. And so I will not say this morning everything that you want me to say about prayer. And so please just forgive me if I don't say your favorite thing about prayer. But what I want to do is hopefully help us get motivated by the why around why we should be doing this, morning prayer. And then we're going to talk about the how of morning prayer. So when you wake up in the morning, I believe that you set a trajectory for your day. How many of you would agree with that? Like when you wake up in the morning, the first few things that you do set a trajectory for, is this gonna be a good day, a bad day, productive day, unproductive day, lazy day, busy day? Like the first few things you do, that's why they say when you make your bed in the morning, it's like that first little domino. You're like, oh, you did something productive. You might have a productive day now because you're not lazy because you made your bed. My wife's like, yeah, how come you don't make the bed then? You're up there preaching this on a stage, come on. But apparently, making the bed, it's important. When you get up in the morning, you set a trajectory for your day. And I also think that when you get up in the morning, you have to like make up your mindset, and you have to shift out of certain mindsets that are almost like the default of our culture. There is like a default mindset that is trying to be programmed into you, and when you wake up in the morning and you decide, I'm gonna pray, you shift out of that mindset. So I wanna talk about 5 shifts that morning prayer does for us. 5 shifts that it shifts us out of and shifts us into something much better. The first shift is a shift into gratitude. When you wake up, how many of you, when you wake up, you are grumpy? You are like, it's how cold outside? Oh man, when I get out of this bed, I'm not going to be happy. Like you are grumpy. And yet when you get out of bed and the first thing that you do is pray, it shifts you from that grumpiness into a place of gratitude. Because part of prayer is saying, God, thank you that I'm alive. Thank you for this breath. Thank you for who you are and what you have done for me. And what science is showing, apart from God, is that just the simple act of gratitude, daily gratitude, journaling about gratitude. Talk to any life coach apart from Christianity, and they will say, you need a journal where you journal your gratitude, because the science of gratitude shows that being grateful, spending time being grateful every day, makes you happier. It lowers your anxiety and your depression and your tendency to ruminate on negative thoughts. That's apart from Christianity. Now let's add Christianity in when you're being grateful to someone. You're being grateful to God. You're speaking to God. This isn't just you alone doing this thing by yourself, talking to the universe, but you're talking to God. Gratitude, this shift, you can shift from grumpiness to gratitude, and suddenly the anxieties and the depression and the negativity begin to melt away. That's shift number 1. The second shift is that how else do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Sometimes you're grumpy. Sometimes what kind of thoughts flood in? They flood in, I got a lot to do today. I got a lot to do today because a worthy person does things. A worthy person is productive in the world. And so I got to do things today. And Lord knows that there was things that I did last night that I'm not going to do those again today. And so you can begin a legalistic kind of mindset, like an earning mindset. Yesterday, I got an F. Today, I'm going to get an A. But when you begin with prayer, instead of that, I got to earn and prove myself today, you can begin with grace. Today, God, I just breathe in your grace, that life is a gift, that your forgiveness is a gift, that I don't have to live based on all of my own willpower today, that your grace could be pouring into me like rocket fuel, propelling me through the day. I don't have to have this legalistic mindset. I can shift into grace. How else do we feel in the morning? Sometimes anxious, worried, fearful. Paul, when he writes to the church in Philippi, says this around the idea of peace. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Don't be anxious. When you wake up, don't be anxious. Instead, bring it to God in prayer and thanksgiving. And then he says, this is what you'll get in return. Will be the byproduct of doing this. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I heard someone once say that if you're learning how to pray, or that this is like a great prayer, if you're feeling stuck, you just say, here, God, you take it. You take all of the anxious thoughts, all of the worries, all of the fears, and the most simple way that you can pray is, God, I can't hold this. I don't want to hold this all day. So here, God, you take it. And I think what Paul is saying is when you do that, God says, oh, sure, I'll take that. And then here, you can have peace. And how does that work? I don't quite understand. It transcends all understanding exactly how that works. But there is something about waking up in the morning and saying, God, yep, anxiety, fear, worry, okay, it's all there. I give it to you. And then we get peace in return. I heard one writer say it this way, that the difference between worrying and prayer is that in prayer, you're worrying to a person. Worrying is like, that's all about, I gotta do it, how am I ever gonna? And prayer is just taking all those thoughts, but you're just saying them to God. You're offloading them to God, and then he gives us his peace in return. How else do we feel in the morning? You can feel distracted. We live in a world full of distraction. We live in a world, and we're kind of wired that like we kind of enjoy distraction. I heard one comedian put it this way, that we're all like goldfish in a goldfish bowl, and we have like a 2-second memory, and we're just swimming around from one thing to the next. We're like, ooh, a castle. Ooh, a guy with bubbles coming out of his head. Ooh, pretty rocks. Ooh, a castle. Oh, and we just live life just on these. Anybody know that treadmill of distraction? Like the doom scrolling, just like one app. You ever like close an app and then you go, I should do something else, and then and then you hit that app again. You're like, what just happened? I thought I got out of the matrix and then it sucked me right back in. Like we're in this like distracted world. And so what do you do in the morning? I bet most of us when we do what we do in the morning, we pull out our phones and you look at your email. Why is that a bad thing? I'm looking at my email. I want to be productive. I want to find out what's going on in the world. I heard one life coach say it this way, that your email is someone else's agenda for your life. Your email is someone else's agenda for your life. And so what is it like to wake up in the morning and go, what does everybody want me to do today? Is that what life is? You should wake up and be like, oh, they need this and they need this. And what kind of morning routine is that? Or you open up your phone and where do you go? You go social media. You know what social media is programmed to trigger within us? 2 primary things, anger and fear. If only I had a relevant example of how social media is triggering anger and fear. And so you're like, first thing I want to do in the morning, trigger my anger and fear. Great. Get other people's agendas for me. What if you could shift from that into your true purpose? I think morning prayer shifts us back into being rooted in what are you actually here to do? I think Jesus models this for us in that story from Mark chapter 1. Wake up in the morning. Where's Jesus? Where did he go? We got people at the door. We got people, everybody's looking for him. Mark says this, that Simon and his companions went to look for him, Jesus. And when they found him, they exclaimed, don't you know everybody's looking for you? This is the equivalent of Jesus looking at his email in the morning and like, oh, look at everybody needs me. Literally, like Jesus' email list came barking at him in his moment of prayer, like, Jesus, everybody needs you. What are you doing? We gotta go. The circus needs to get going again. But Jesus had spent the morning with his Father, being rooted in his purpose. And he says what his purpose is. Jesus replied, let's go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That's why I have come. Miracles are great, but they're meant to point people to me and the bigger thing that I'm doing, which is preaching about the coming of the kingdom of God, which won't just transform people for a limited amount of time, but is going to transform the entire world and make all things new. Sorry, we can't stay here and keep healing people, because that's not why I've come. And morning prayer does the same thing for us. Not email, not social media. What I need to do first thing in the morning is be with my Father and be reminded, what have you placed inside of me that only I can bring into the world? You may be like, oh, that's rather lofty. All of us have that. Really? All of us are in relationships with other people that need to be loved and need to have the love of the Father modeled to them. Many of us in here have influence with children. Many of us in here have relationships that have a spouse. Those types of things. You are the only one who can be the spouse to your spouse. You're the only one who can be a father to your kids. And sometimes in the morning, you just need to be rooted in that. Of all the distractions today, I just need to be a father, because I'm the only one that can do that for my kids. When you wake up in the morning and go to morning prayer, it can shift you from distraction and hurriedness and other people's agendas for you and get you rooted in your purpose. The last shift, the 5th shift, is a shift from what I call deism. Deism meaning this idea that, like, yes, there is a God, but he's like a watchmaker. And he made the world and he made us, but he kind of set it in motion and then he just pushed it and it's going, and now he's kind of just standing back watching. It's really tempting to even accidentally slip into forms of deism where you're like, I believe in God, I believe all the church stuff, but is God really here? Is he really like with me? Is he really influencing anything? It's so easy to have a little light deism within us. And when we begin with prayer, we shift from that deism that has loneliness attached to it, and we are reminded of his presence, that he's with us. God is not far away. When we pray, we're not picking up a phone, dialing far away. When we pray, we are becoming aware and present to the God who is right here with us. The great spiritual writer Thomas Keating put it this way: the chief thing that separates us from God is the thought that we are separated from him. You can easily begin to slip into God's far away, I'm not really as connected to him, I probably pushed him away yesterday. And that thought alone can keep you from him. And the simple shift, I'm just gonna be with him and be reminded he is here and he loves me. That can be a huge shift. Suddenly God is as close as your breath. The God that you thought was far away is suddenly now right here in the room with you. What would it be like if you could make these shifts? Instead of being grumpy and legalistic and worried and anxious and distracted and this form of deism, instead you shift into gratitude and grace and purpose and peace and presence. What if you can make the shift into those things? Now I want to talk about how. That's why prayer, morning prayer, is a keystone habit for us. It makes those shifts for us. But what about how? How could you begin to do this? And to talk about how, I want to use the framework from week 3 of the series, from the Atomic Habits framework, which was, if you want to start a new habit, you got to make it easy, you got to make it attractive. Sorry, you got to make it obvious, you got to make it attractive, you got to make it easy, and you got to make it satisfying. If you want to start a new habit, obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And so using that framework, I want to talk about how you could begin to build a prayer life of morning prayer and begin the simple habit of doing it. And so you got to begin with, you got to make it obvious. So what's going to be your cue? You need a trigger of some sort. You need a cue that is going to remind you, oh yeah, I have that new habit that I'm doing. So it's got to be obvious. Here's your obvious cue for those of us beginning, okay? When you wake up, you will army roll out of bed onto the floor and hit your knees beside the bed, okay? That's your cue. When you wake up, boom, I'm on the floor. And if you do that, you win. If you do that simple move, you win. Even if it's, I army rolled out of bed, I hit my knees, and then I fell right back asleep. Even if that happens, it doesn't matter, you win. Because you're beginning a new habit. You're beginning to get this new trigger involved where you're like, that's what I do. When I first wake up, I go to God in prayer, just like Jesus did very early in the morning, even if it's not early in the morning. First thing when you wake up, you roll out of bed, you hit your knees. That's how you make it obvious. How do you make it attractive? In order to make it attractive, I think we got to attach it to our identity. We got to attach it to the bigger hopes and dreams that we have. There's these things that I want to, that are inside of me. There's these things that I want to do. There's these things that I want to stop doing. And I'm going to believe that this is a keystone habit for me. And so this is attractive, maybe not because of this moment in prayer is going to be everything that I ever dreamed. But this moment is attractive to me because I believe that tied to this moment and the habit and the rhythm and the routine of this is the rest of my life. Obvious, attractive, easy. I want to introduce you to a simple template to make it easy. A template where you use the letters from pray, P-R-A-Y, and each one of the letters stands for a different part of your prayer. And if you're just beginning to build this, I want to encourage you to just 4 minutes. 1 minute on each of the letters. Okay, so you're gonna roll out of bed, hit your knees, then you're gonna go through these 4 letters, and then you're gonna get some sort of satisfaction. You're gonna have a reward of some type afterwards. So maybe you don't get to have your coffee until you do this. Maybe you don't get to eat breakfast until you do this. Maybe you're gonna keep a journal or just a tally. You're gonna have by your bed a little thing where you go, did it today. The science is that that little check mark motion is that's all our little stupid brains need to encourage us to I did it, I feel so good, this is great. But some sort of little reward afterwards, okay? So here's the simple acronym, pray. First, we're gonna begin with praise. We're gonna begin all the things that we're thankful for. Tell God who he is, all the things that he's done in the past, who he is to you. Talk about his character, all the things that you know to say. I praise you, God. And if right now is really hard and you're like, I look forward to today and I don't have a lot to praise God about, well then just praise him for what he's done, because what he's done already is enough. Praise him for who he's been and his faithfulness in the past. You can praise him for the hope that you have for the future, but begin with praise. And then you're gonna move into repentance. Repentance is when you say, God, there's things in my life and there's patterns and there's ways of thinking that I don't want to be there. And so in this moment, even if today I fall back into them, in this moment, I turn to you. I decide and I declare, that's not who I want to be. Even if it's only for a minute of today, I will spend this minute saying, that's not who I want to be. God, please help me not to be that person anymore. I repent, I turn. And then after repenting, you begin to ask. You begin to ask God for all the things that you need. And what's funny about prayer and asking is I find this is the part of prayer that some of us really struggle with. It's the asking. It's the asking because there's a bit of like the philosophical, well, why do I got to ask God for stuff that he already knows? Doesn't he know everything? I mean, you could debate around that. Like, could God decide not to know something? I don't know. But why am I asking God for things that he already knows? Some of us, it's like a holiness move. Like, I don't ask God for things because I only want what he's going to give me. And so, my relationship, I'm not like a selfish person in my prayer. And yet all of those ideas are counter to the way Jesus teaches us to pray. Because everywhere that Jesus teaches us how to pray, he teaches us to ask. He tells a parable one time to his students after they ask him, Jesus, would you teach us how to pray? And he gives them a parable to teach them about the power of asking. He says, imagine like some guests showed up late one night at your home. Imagine like some guests showed up and suddenly they're there and you don't have enough food. And what are you gonna do? Well, you're gonna probably go to another friend's house. You're gonna start banging on the door. Even if it's in the middle of the night, you're gonna be like, hey, Roy and Donna are here from London and we need some bread. I need some bread for my friends. Like they need to come down. And what's your friend gonna do? It's the middle of the night. He's gonna open up the window. What are you doing? It's the middle of the night. My kids are in bed. Everything's put away. I'm not giving you any bread. And Jesus says, your friend may not give you the bread because he's your friend, but because of your audacious, crazy behavior, he'll give you the bread. Now you hear that story, you go, so wait, is God the friend who reluctantly gives the bread? No, that's not what Jesus is saying. Later on in the teaching, he says, so how much more? How much more will your Father, who wants to give you good gifts, give you what you ask for? He's trying to paint this picture. He's like, imagine your friend reluctantly, only because of your audacious banging at his door. Imagine that friend will give you bread. Okay, now switch the scenario. You're banging on the door of your heavenly Father who loves you and desires to give you good gifts. How much more is he going to answer your prayer? This is how Jesus teaches us to pray. And I know that bundled up with all of that is, well, then how come I pray for things that I don't get? And how come everything that I want to happen doesn't happen? That's why we need the last part of prayer, which is where we yield, which is where we say, God, now I've done all the speaking. Now I invite you to speak. God, would you now speak to me about how maybe the things that I'm asking for aren't going to be answered? Would you now just be present with me? We yield. Prayer isn't always just us and our laundry list of things. There's got to be a part of prayer where we're like, okay, now God, now you speak. The great Saint Mother Teresa was once asked about her prayer life because people were like, Mother Teresa, you must have an amazing prayer life. I mean, Mother Teresa, please teach us how to pray. And famously she said, oh, when I pray, I don't say much. I don't really say a lot at all. People were like, well, then God must say a ton then. I mean, if you're not saying stuff, God must be saying stuff. What does God say? What does God say when you pray? She's like, he doesn't say a lot either. And if you don't understand that, then I can't really explain it to you. She was trying to explain to people that for her, prayer was about this intimate communion that she spent with God. When I was first married, after dinner, my wife would often want to go for walks. And I'd be like, why do you want to go for a walk? I don't want to go for a walk. I want to watch Netflix. What's going on? Why do you always want to go for a walk? This is the weirdest thing. Like, we already exercise. We're fit people. We don't need to go for walks. And finally, one day, I got it out of her why she wanted to go for walks. You know what she said? Because I want to hold your hand. And when we go for walks, you tend to hold my hand. That's what I think prayer is like. God's like, why do I want you to pray? Because I want to hold you. And when you're in this posture, I get to hold you. When you're in this surrendered, yielded posture, I get to hold you and remind you just how much I love you. Pray, praise, repent, ask, and yield. I think this can be a keystone habit in our lives that will begin to transform how we experience all of life. And I actually think that it's something that Jesus teaches us to do. Not only is it something that he models for us in that passage that we looked at in Mark chapter 1, but it's something that Jesus teaches us is a keystone habit that will protect our lives. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives a whole host of like summary teachings that kind of encapsulate the whole teaching of the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount is Matthew chapters 5 to 7. And one of the stories at the end of this sermon is a parable that you've probably heard before, even if you don't have any church background at all. And it's about the wise and the foolish builders. It's about there was one guy, and he was really wise. And what did he do? He built his house on a rock. Come on, say it. Rock. He built his house on the, oh, that was still pathetic. He built his house on the rock. And when the storms came and the waters rose, his house stood firm. There was another guy. He built his house on the sand. Yes. He built his house on the sand. And when the storms came and the waters rose, his house got swept away. Now, whenever I think about this story, and maybe when you think about this story, you think, yeah, so I want to build my house on the rock. And I tend to veer towards the idea of building my house on the rock as meaning my belief in Jesus. Like, I think the right things about Jesus, and that's what it means to build my house on the rock. Maybe some of you can resonate with that, and you're like, what are you about to say if that's not what that means? I'm gonna show you what Jesus says it means. It's not about what we think. Jesus says building your life on the rock is more than what you think. In this parable, this is how he begins it. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Everyone who hears these words, which words? What words is he talking about? The words from the Sermon on the Mount, of which are many words about prayer. We get the Lord's Prayer from the Sermon on the Mount. We get the ask, seek, knock, and the door shall be open to you from the Lord's Prayer. We get the idea of the good Father who desires to give us good gifts from the Sermon on the Mount. So at least part of what he says, here's these words of mine, he's talking about his teaching on prayer. And he doesn't just say, believe these things. He says, put them into practice. And your house, your life will be like a man who built his house on the rock. I've had plenty of difficult times in my life. One of which was when all at the same time, we were moving cities, we were building a house, we were having our first child, and I was starting my first job as a lead pastor of a church. All four of those were happening at the same time. And the house that we were building, the builder didn't have it ready on time. And so the moving into the new house with our new baby to start the new job turned into moving in with my wonderful, benevolent in-laws who still lived an hour away from my new job. And suddenly I had all of this anger towards this builder who I thought was cheating us. And I had all of this I'm extra tired now as I have to try to do this new job and deal with people who are upset that I was wearing jeans on stage. And I'm like, I didn't realize that this job came with all of this animosity. I thought I thought Christians loved each other. It was craziness. I was dealing with all this, and that's one of the times in my life where I realized how important the habit of morning prayer was. That when I began my day with my Father who loves me, it set the trajectory for the rest of the day. And some of you, I know, it feels like your lives have been decimated, and you're listening to I want to get unstuck, and I feel like I don't know where to begin because I could list you 100 things in my life that need to change. And I want you to hear this morning the first piece The keystone habit is morning prayer. And so I want to invite you to start trying this. Roll out of bed and hit your knees, even if it's just months of that and your actual prayers of what you're saying are a mess and you end up falling asleep and you crawl back to bed. Just start with that simple cue and ask God to help you get this routine into your life. You know, when I thought about how to end this series, I was trying to think of something really practical that we could talk about, which is why I ended up with prayer as a keystone habit. But I also realized that prayer is like the center of this whole thing, following Jesus. When we talk about following Jesus, it's like the centerpiece, the idea that we would spend time communing with God. And yet that communion is only possible because of the sacrifice of Jesus. Because he took our sins upon himself and died on a cross for us. The access that we have to our Father is only possible because of his sacrifice. And so we thought, well, let's end then this series by celebrating communion together. So hopefully you got one of these packages when you came in. And if you didn't, just put up a hand. I'm sure an usher would love to bring you one. If you've never used it before, there's like a piece of thin plastic at the top that you got to take off. And then the other one is for the juice. And if you're at home, I invite you to get some bread. You can hit pause. It's okay. We'll be here. Hit pause. Grab some bread. Grab some juice. Grab some wine, whatever it is. But we're going to celebrate this morning. And I wanted to lead you in a really simple reflection before we do that. The first part is just look at the elements and remember what they represent. They represent the body and blood of Jesus, who was an actual person, God in the flesh, who walked among us and embraced a brutal, horrific death of a traitor of the nation on a cross for us. The bread represents his body that was stripped and striped. And the wine or the juice represents his blood that flowed out for our forgiveness. And he did all of this because he knew that deep within us still lied the image of God. He knew that deep within us, all those things that we feel that we want to get out, he saw all of those because he put those in us, and he did all of this so that we could be restored to the life that we were created to live. And so maybe before we take this, thinking about the sacrifice and the calling that he has on our lives, the invitation to abundant life that he extends to us, we also need to just spend a minute in repentance of recognizing all the ways that we fail, that we're not strong enough, that we willfully choose to go the other way, to give up, to be weak. Jesus, in this moment we repent of our betrayal. And we thank you that you keep chasing after us with your love. And so we take the bread, the cracker, and we eat this in remembrance of his body that was given for us. And we take the cup, and we drink this in remembrance of the new covenant that he bled to create for us. Would you pray with me before we go? Our Father, our Abba, our Daddy, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory. God, would you help us get unstuck? God, would you drive us to morning prayer? Would you inspire us? Would you remind us of all that you put inside of us, and that more than we could ever imagine, you want to see us thriving. You want to see us bearing your image, bringing you glory. God, we ask for your help, trusting that you love us. And Spirit, trusting that there is power available when we pray in the strong, resurrected name of Jesus. In his name we ask. Amen.